talk a while ago, and I had envisioned this as a draft, but here it is. And I think I was just trying to be provocative, because I'm probably not against all identification with avatars in video games. But when I started to think about putting this together, I realized that even if it wasn't a central concern in every work, every piece of research that I've done, that there were strands and aspects of avatars and identity that can run through them. So what I want to do is kind of go through a few of those as kind of case studies and think through, where identification comes in or it doesn't, and especially how game fiction plays an important role in kind of nudging players in one way or another. And certainly we've talked about this over the last few days, how different types of avatars can promote or work against identification. But even within a certain genre, like I'm going to talk about a couple of MMOs, there are certain ways that the game constructs a fiction for players that can enhance or encourage identification or can actively work against it. And to give you an idea of kind of where I'm coming from, I'm not a philosopher. I come out of a media studies, mass communication background. And so when I think about identification, I'm probably drawing from ideas from Althusser and his idea of interpolation, we're hailed as individuals, and also Butler's idea that we perform our identities, that we gradually kind of call ourselves into being with each act that we do. And also, I should give a shout out to Foucault and failing for mentioning it yesterday, this idea of the technologies of the self, that we do have certain boundaries of how we're supposed to act, but we have a certain amount of play within those boundaries that we can kind of decide for ourselves. And because I'm a mass comm background, I do like some numbers. These may be a little hard to read here, but this is US internet time. I just wanted to kind of show things have sort of shifted over the last few years. And the number one place that people spend their time is with social network sites, like Facebook and MySpace. And that's been a big jump. And the number two is online games, displacing email, which should make sense to all of us. And I should also point out that with social networks like Facebook, about 40% of Facebook's traffic is for the games themselves. So there is a lot of games being played online. And most of the games that I'll talk about today are online games. And one of the big sort of themes throughout a lot of my research has been women in games. And when I started about 10 years ago, the question was, why don't women play games? And of course they did, and they do more and more now. But at the time it was sort of, women were like the undiscovered country for game developers, and if we could only figure out the magic code. And as an early researcher, I actually found that they did. Of course, game developers really just wanted women to buy games. That was the most important thing. And one of the early kind of areas that seemed the most promising were massively multiplayer online games. At the time, they seemed the most progressive. They had one of the highest percentages of women players. And I should distinguish that most of the time I'm talking about adult women, not girls. And now it seems that actually, compared to other types of games like casual or social, MMOs have fewer women players as a percentage. But at the time, they were pretty popular. And so one of the earliest studies that I want to talk about was women gamers who played World of Warcraft and also Age of Conan. And the question that was driving this initial study was, how do women reflect on their avatars and gear? And this was a study that I did with a graduate student of mine at the time. And of course, if you know from the early evidence, there were lots of anecdotal accounts as well as some more published research that women preferred female avatars. I did a study with some colleagues a couple of years ago, content analysis of the top 150 selling games in the US, and less than 20% of playable characters were female. But over and over you would hear again, women saying, I want a female character to be able to play. And so we were questioning, can we find this? What's going on? And also this idea of gear, because as you know, in MMOs, gear plays a hugely important role. And in many MMOs, it can be aesthetically pleasing or aesthetically ugly, but it's definitely functional. So what we did was we found some women, a little bit more than a dozen. It was very easy to find female players of WoW. It was very hard to find women players of Age of Conan. If you've ever played it, you know why. It's about 95% male. It's very hyper hypersexualized, very kind of some sexist themes within it. At the time that it was released, it was like the most graphically advanced MMO with some of the most intricate customization features for your avatars, so that's why we were interested in it. But we found a few women. This is their age range. These were, there were a few super heavy players, but these were still fairly committed players. And so we were asking them about their avatars, their choices, and how they felt about the game itself. And we found kind of what we expected. Every player that we talked to, the one that they played the most was a woman, was a female of some sort. And these are unprompted. I was not thinking about identity at the time, but these women would use these terms in relation to their avatars. Women also tend to have more alts than male players do, for whatever reasons. Players will talk about, I wanted to try a different starting city, I wanted to try a different race-class combination. This is, of course, particular in certain MMOs. In something like Final Fantasy XI Online, you can have one avatar and change the job. You can't change the race. But in other MMOs like WoW, you have to start a different character, and they're free to a certain extent. So the women would try out these different ones, and a few of them said that they did have a couple of male avatars, but for many of them, all of their alts were female as well. And I should also point out some other research that I've done kind of related to this with EverQuest 2 with some colleagues. We found that, again, women were kind of at about the 18% of players, but of the hardcore players, the most committed, women were the hardest of the hardcore. They played the most of the hardcore. And also Nikki has found this as well. Women are least likely to quit. They're the most loyal of the players if you ask if you have plans to leave, like in the next 6 months or a year. Okay. So, we asked them, why did you make the particular choices that you did with these avatars? And, they'll mention, I think this is an interesting phrase, I'll be living through vicariously. And interestingly, many women talked about their avatars kind of taking on a life of their own. They'd say that they developed a personality. And these were not even women who actively role-played, but felt that, certain of their avatars had certain kind of personalities that they saw emerging the more that they played them. And some of them actually talked about them kind of reflecting their real-world selves. And so Nola here says, she picked the Tauren because it sort of was the most reflective of her particular body shape. And so it represented her best. Interestingly, and in talking, this was not like a comparative study. It would be interesting to see how men feel about their avatars, which is something we didn't choose to do for this. But people didn't seem to have a problem playing an elf or an orc. That was fine. But for some reason, gender, that was where the alignment seemed to need to be. So you could be as fantastic as you wanted, but the gender had to line up for most people. We asked them, why don't we play male characters? You saw some of the quotes before, but for some players it was also the design. They said that they were ugly, they were just horrible looking, that they were aesthetically unpleasing, they were very stereotypical. And if you can see, the sexual dimorphism in the avatars, it's too beefy, you can clearly see between the male and the female versions of these avatars, what they're talking about. And interestingly, even like the orcs and the trolls, which you would not think of as like hypersexualized races, the females are very clearly coded with the breasts and the hips. And I should also point out, male blood elves, if you know WoW, when they were initially designed, the designers actually changed them to look more beefy because some players complained that they looked too gay. So in addition to the choices, players did talk a lot about customizations being very important to them. WoW had introduced a barbershop where you could alter the looks, but they felt that it really wasn't extensive enough. Some of them mentioned, they just recycle hairstyles and certain faces. They also wanted to be able to change the body. They thought it would be cool if you're a mage, why would you have a big beefy body if you're a mage? But if you're a warrior and you grow more powerful, why doesn't your body grow more powerful as well? Interestingly, the Age of Conan players loved the customization, the few who could get past the sexism. But that greater customization was not enough of an enticement for the WoW players, most of the WoW players, to go over to Age of Conan. So even though they would like more customization, it was not something that would make them leave the game. And so as far as gear, or in the case of female avatars, it's lag, most of them acknowledge that, you know, there was a certain element to the fantasy art style that was just reflected in these games. Some of them seemed resigned to it, some of them liked it. Some of them said it didn't bother me. Interestingly, you know, we weren't sure. Some of them said, you know, I know it should bother me, but it doesn't. And we weren't sure if it was because they felt like they were talking to us as academics and they felt like they should register that they knew that there was sexism, but somehow they were okay with that. You know, we couldn't really tease that out totally. But they also, especially the raters, the ones who were really interested in, you know, competition and high-level achievement, acknowledge that I don't really care how it looks if I'm rating. It's like my work clothes. You know, I wear my work clothes at work. If I'm just hanging around the city, I can do what I want. And likewise, they also took great satisfaction in gaining particular items or crafting them. So if they worked very hard, they said, you know, this shows what I've achieved. And I was able to create this, and so even if it looks ugly. And I should point out also, anecdotally, some of my former students who are men will talk about, oh, you know, I was in this raid, and I finally got the loot drop, and I got these shoulders, and they were really ugly. But they're my shoulders, so I'm going to wear them. So men talk about this as well. Interestingly, this wasn't part of the study, but I mentioned women in WoW and Age of Conan pretty much always played a female character. Gender switching is more common among male players. Even in a space like Second Life, actually far fewer women gender switch, even though in Second Life you're sort of encouraged to be whatever you would like to be, even non-humanoid. And the hypersexualization of avatars is even more pronounced in Second Life, and both men and women do this. So even though you can be anything you want, this is usually what you get in Second Life. So the women in avatars, you know, for these initial studies, you know, women thought of the gear as functional. They, you know, were certainly aware of the aesthetics of them. They felt like these avatars did represent them in some way, and that reflected their own interests and background. For some of them, it was their body shape or their gender. But sometimes they also could separate that out in the interests of, you know, playing a particular part of the game. So that was a more traditional MMO. The second one is Faunasphere. How many of you have played Faunasphere? Okay. Well, you can't anymore. But it was a casual MMO. Big Fish Games launched it in 2009. They're a developer and publisher of mostly single-player downloadable casual games, but they tried to get into this casual MMO space. And their predominant player base has been adult women, so women 40 plus. And I had initially done some work on a single-player game of theirs. One of their developers actually read my study and said, hey, this is cool, and contacted me, and I actually worked with them to get a little bit of data from them to do this study on Faunasphere. This is probably the darkest that the game ever looks. You are the little white guy there. I think he's a sniffer. His name is Puppy. And you don't kill things, you zap pollution. The big plant-like thing, that's Monty. Most of the time the world is happy and bright. There's no Monty. He's an instance. But you zap pollution in order to level up. These are kind of what some of the fauna look like. You zap pollution to get points. When you level up, your fauna lays an egg. Okay? And then you bring it back to your sphere and you hatch it. And most of the game is based on decorating your sphere and on cross-breeding fauna. So you traded eggs with other players. And the game constantly introduced new types of fauna, and you tried to breed them for different variations. And there was no real science behind this. And players tried endlessly to figure it out. You know, they tried theory crafting, and it just didn't work. So we did this study. We got a survey going, and the developers actually posted it on their forums and sent it out with their newsletter, so we got quite a few responses. We got a little bit of usage data from the company, interviewed the community manager, and looked at the forums. And you can see here where the player base comes from. Who played? So, big shift, you know, from kind of the 18% female to now 93% female, and mostly adult, as you can see here, pretty well educated. Big difference, prior MMO experience. mostly no experience. I think about 8% they said they did not know what an MMO was. So these players are pretty new. Many of them said, this is my first online social game experience ever. And you can see here, for the few who did, what else they played. I mentioned this as a casual MMO, but these were not casual players at all. Of course, even though we got quite a few respondents, this is something I think is typical of any kind of user study. You get the hardest of the hardcore because they're the ones who are most interested in playing. The casual people don't read the forums or they don't care enough to respond. You get a few haters, who really want to tell you how much it bothers them. But mostly these are people who are happy, who are playing quite a bit. And if you add these hours up, they are adding up to probably more than what you saw with the World of Warcraft players. And interestingly, some of the early research showed that female players were mostly interested in socializing more than things like achieving or competition. And we had come up with a list of the typical activities you can do in the game and asked players to rank them. And as you can see here, socializing was down at number 5. Completing goals or their quests. As I mentioned, breeding fauna, that was kind of a central thing built in. Leveling up, you had to level them up in order to lay an egg. So it's kind of a two-step process. And then there were some people who really were into the decoration of their spheres, their personal sphere. What kind of came out of this, at first when we went in, we were thinking along the lines of that traditional theory of MMO players and kind of what it means to socialize, what it means to achieve, what it means to compete in an MMO. And we suddenly realized, wait a minute, this is an entirely different type of game, even though it's an MMO. The fiction is very, very different. These people were not addressed as players. They were addressed as caretakers. That's what they were called by the developers. They had no actual avatar of their own. Their avatars were their fauna, and they could have multiple fauna. If you had a free account, you were limited to 3. If you had a paid account, you could get up to 40, I think, by the time the game closed. Which I should mention. About a month and a half ago, this announcement appeared. And as anyone who follows MMOs knows, the players were not amused. And suddenly the outrage poured in. Interestingly, suddenly at this point, the social becomes very important. I'll be missing all my friends. This is where I met all my best friends. I'm very sad to see this game. I've cried real tears over the news. And of course, people were sad and upset. Some people were very mad. And kind of seizing on this opportunity, my research assistant and I contacted the players, spent more time in the game kind of as it got close to closure. It had a month before the shutdown. And they started a Facebook group afterwards, and they had started a site. Now every time you have an MMO closing, you kind of have a group of virtual refugees who are like, where will we go? What will we do now? And so they did this on Facebook. And in interviewing about 25 of them, kind of these further differences really emerged in thinking through, how they played the game. We asked them, what were you doing when the game closed? Because it closed March 15th at like 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And so you can see here, it was interesting, some people got together with groups in public spaces to talk and just kind of set off fireworks and be together. Some people went to their private spheres to be with their fauna, who they considered the main, the people or creatures most important to them. And it mentions here denning. The fauna had particular dens that they slept in, and that gave them sort of happiness or health points. I spent time with them. I had them do tricks. I fed them. I made them happy. I started throwing all my food on the ground, and I cried. I should also point out, I asked for these interviews. People were more than happy to give me pages and pages. One of them posted on her wall, I got this, the questions, and I started crying so hard I couldn't answer the questions. And people started getting more and more reflective on kind of how they thought about the space and the fiction and their role in it. And so this is very different from what you saw before with the women who talked about these avatars representing themselves. For these people, and you can think about this particularly in gendered terms because a lot of them talked about it this way. The fauna were their children. You gave birth, you fed them, you cared for them, you taught them things. You talked with other moms about it. They talked about them very much in pet-like terms. I didn't grab the screenshot for this morning. I had posted to their Facebook group about asking for these interviews. I'd mentioned an early study that I had done, and I talked about all the women players. And actually, a man posted and said, "What about the male players?" And I was like, I have been waiting 10 years to hear that. Never hear that. So there were a few male players, but it was very, very female. And again, really, the players themselves and stepping back. Look at the premise of the game. It's about naming and raising pets. In the real world, a good person would never just walk away and abandon their pet. That's what Big Fish Games made us do. They gave us creatures to love, even if they were only pixels, and then told us they were taking them away from us. And they're still posting weeks later about how they miss their fauna. Now, certainly they've retained some elements of their community, the social community via the Facebook group and some other games. But for them, the fauna were an important part, the game space itself. And as I mentioned, what is it about these games? I mentioned the fiction is important, even in an MMO. The game itself pushed them to think this way, right? To see themselves as caretakers rather than an avatar. And you might think if they're not positioning themselves within the game, maybe so the game doesn't mean as much, but clearly it does. It can be still very, very important. This is Glitch. About 200 of them have gotten into Glitch, which is another kind of browser-based MMO. It's in closed alpha, so it's up about 1 day a week. You need a special invite to get in. What will be interesting to see is it's a little bit more traditional in terms of you have this one avatar that you can stylize. There's no hatching. There are animals and worlds where you can help build out the world a little bit. The players are already creating little mashups of Faunasphere and Glitch. But it'll be interesting to see. I want to keep tracking them in terms of how are they shifting in terms of adapting to this space? Will they make the shift? And what does it do to their sense of identification or not? Story 3, social games. At the same time as I was studying Faunasphere, I was also studying social games or Facebook games. And I got interested in this question. The short answer is not much. But I wanted to know, not from a player perspective here, but from a game mechanic perspective, going back to that idea of the fiction of the game nudging you in a certain way, what elements might lend themselves to being social. And kind of, I'll get back to here at the end of this part again, this idea of avatars and identification, and kind of what in social games probably pushes you away from or goes against any kind of real identification. So the researchers, there was me, I had a research assistant in undergrad at MIT, and that's my dog in the center. Because with a lot of these games, you're visiting and gifting, and I needed to see both sides of the interaction. So Jasper heartily agreed to sign up for Facebook. So if you need a friend for a game, Jasper Doberman, friend of him. So the challenge, to test as many social games as possible, identify the major mechanics, as well as any unusual or interesting elements. And so we played more than 80 games. There were 50 I created charts for. I'm not going to show you the charts. That was part of a different presentation. If you would like to see those, let me know and I will send them to you. This is just a smattering. We looked at the most popular games as ranked by app data. We looked at particular genres to make sure we had good representation from things like Sims and RPGs and real-time strategy, all of those. We looked at quirky and unusual games. We read reviews on GameZebo to find interesting things so that it's not entirely representative because it keeps changing so quickly. Some of these games no longer exist. Some of them have massively kind of reworked things from when we started. So what did I mean by social? What types of interactions does it offer players? Meaningful interactions. Opportunities to communicate, to talk with one another in real time or not. Were there NPCs present? And what could you do with them? What level of importance did these interactions play on the actual gameplay? Was it kind of like frosting on the top of the cake, or was it an integral element? Was competition an essential element of a game, or cooperation? And what allowances did it make? Could you play this game pretty much just with your friends, or did it bring in the opportunity to interact with strangers? And so, again, if you play Facebook games, you know that these were kind of the major ones going on. The friend bar, I'll talk about each of these in turn. Gifting, visiting, challenging competition, and communication. So for the friend bar, you're kind of surrounded by your friends, silently but visually. As you know from most Facebook games, at the bottom there's this bar, the friend bar, and in the beginning you pretty much had to invite your friends to play, and their pictures would slowly appear as they said yes. These games are now starting to auto-populate, so if you sign up for Cityville, when it loads, automatically all of your friends who are also playing the game, their faces pop up. So they greet you, and this happens every time. So you're kind of surrounded by them. Of course, there's always the add a friend, so that you can invite somebody else, and the game is constantly prompting you to. And the auto-populate makes it a little quicker and easier to get into the game. Of course, your friends are ranked in some way. There's usually a level or a score, and you are placed amongst them so you can see kind of how you are doing relative to them. I was just in a kind of an informal leveling war with a friend in Dragon Age Legends, and I was like, damn it, I have to go to Athens, I won't be able to level. And he's like, well, I'm calling it quits with the game. I'm like, oh, wait. But it encourages this kind of thing. You can check your progress, and some of this can be more implicit. Sometimes it's more explicit. Also, if you play the games, you know that usually now those pictures are functional. You can click on them, and it's usually the quickest way to send that particular friend a gift or to visit their particular space. And also, increasingly on the games, there's a starter friend, the fake friend. This one doesn't have one here. But, you know, the person who, Sally Strideright or whatever, who's like level 20 when you get started, she's the one you can visit at first. It gives you something to aspire to. And especially it's valuable if you don't have many friends playing a particular game and you need a friend to interact with to advance. And of course, friendship is quantifiable in Facebook. So in addition to having them around and staring at them nicely and sending them stuff, you often need a certain number of friends in order to advance. So in this game, I forget which one it is, you need a certain number of neighbors to unlock the next planet to go and explore. Of course, there's always the option to plug down real cash if you do not have friends. Gifting. Gifting is sort of this central thing that most people think about in terms of Facebook games. And gifts, I argue, function in two main ways, the potlatch and reciprocation. The potlatch is gifting as this idea, the more that you give away, and the better stuff that you give, the better a friend you are. And you gain status by doing this, right? So you can show off your status, you can give away better stuff, better gifts. You can see in Zoo Kingdom here, most of the time these games have free gifts that you can send to your friends. It's just this little bank of choices. It doesn't cost you anything, right? Zoo Kingdom actually lets you send stuff from your own inventory. Craftily, it does not always let you know it's your own inventory. I've mistakenly sent stuff that I wanted to keep. Mafia Wars lets higher level players give away more valuable gifts. So you can kind of, if you get a really good gift from a friend, you know that they're very high level. And also here is just the idea of, the higher level you get, the more valuable the gift is that you're able to give to people. A few games like Frontierville actually let you give things that you have crafted yourself. And also as part of the potlatch, there are always some friends who are always there for you. You need that one last item to complete a set. And for me, it's Alice. Alice will always be there, to give me that one thing. She must be online all the time. And especially this is true with timed quests and things like this. So gifts can serve this function to kind of show your friendship and your value. Likewise, gifts can serve as a reciprocating device. The idea is, if I send you something, I know you'll probably send me something back. It may not be one-to-one all the time, but you know that it's going to work out most of the time. Zynga's actually automated this. If you play any of their games, you don't have to go through Facebook's horrible, clunky game messages and accept each one manually. When you open the game, this screen appears, and you can just accept. And then it automatically says, do you want to send one back? And you click yes, and poof, one-step gifting. And so, again, it can be one-to-one. You accept a coffee, and it says, do you want to send a coffee back? And you say yes. Or it could just be an implied thing. You know, I send you ribbons, and I know that probably you'll send me stuff when I need it. And likewise, Cityville has these community buildings where you need a certain number of friends to staff them. You send out invites. I need Chris to serve as a librarian so that I can finish building my wedding hall here. And I know he'll probably say yes because, you know, I'll say yes when he asks me to serve as his, I don't know, newspaper editor for something. Interestingly, I found no gifts as a tax. I was kind of curious if this would happen. Of course, the problem is you have to accept gifts. And social, in these social games, always goes sort of happy, shiny. This is not the case in China, I will point out. Where in China, in like a version of Farmville, you can go to your friend's space and not water their crops, but destroy them. And you can go to their hospital and blow it up. Okay, we did not have this here. Would it still be a gift if it was? Okay, so the gifts can be reciprocal. You know, you can have the potlatch. And there's kind of two types of gifts, which I call peripheral and critical. Peripheral gifts are kind of pretty, they're aesthetic. They may not have any kind of bonus built in. They're just kind of fun to have. City of Wonder has like little buildings and little items that might add to the happiness or the cultural value of your city, but really don't contribute a lot. Coffee Bar does the same thing. In contrast, Frontierville here, gifts are essential to send to one another because these are just some of the missions that I had going, and probably all of these missions required an item or numerous items that I could only get as gifts from my friends. And likewise, Cafe World, also by Zynga, you know, to complete this stove, which cooks things faster, I need certain items, as you can see here, which I can only get either from my friends sending me or purchasing via virtual currency. So, you know, the question is, you know, is friendship only about trading stuff? The less importance that the game places on gifts, the more solo experience it is. So some of these games are social in the sense that they force this kind of gifting. They encourage sociality by, you know, forcing you to interact in this very limited, functional way. Visiting is almost as ubiquitous as gifting, but there's a little bit more variation here. One of the big challenges is most people are not playing at the same time. So the most common trope for visiting is you show up and you get stuff for doing so. This is from Cooking Mama. So I went to Shira's Kitchen, I got some coins, I got some experience points, and I got some energy. Ravenwood Fair does the same thing. Chocolatier Sweet Society, similar. Interestingly, this says, help your friends sort the boxes. Why would I skip this? You know, it costs me no energy, I'm just getting stuff, but it gives you the illusion of choice. Of course, to visit, you need a personalized space, someplace to actually go. But once you get there, the actions vary. So first of all, you act on the world, so you can tend crops, clean up ruins, apparently remove ogre footprints. You can interact with some friends' pets or avatars. But most of the time, your friend never knew you were there. Sometimes it says, do you want to post on your wall to say to your friend that you visited? And the annoying people do this every single time. But most people don't. And if you go in, there's really no record for many of these games that you were ever there or really did anything. It doesn't affect the game state at all. And that's a fair number of the games. There are some that do change the existing world. My vineyard, you grow grapes, create wine, you put your wine out to age, your friends can taste it, and if they taste it, it raises the value of it. So when you get in, you can see like somebody was there and tasted your wine. They can leave a note telling you about how it tasted, but mostly it just increases the value. And also, my vineyard has created a space where players can actually create stores, and it gave away these limited time items like Halloween masks or Easter bunnies. And players can now actually sell those to other players using the virtual currency in the game. And so this actually does change the game space. Likewise, in Cityville, I can visit my friend Patricia's city and ask to set up a franchise of one of my own businesses there. She has to accept it, but if she does, then I get a bonus every time she collects from it, and I have to supply it. I can remove it. It tries to make me feel really bad about that, but I can actually insert some of my own buildings into somebody else's space. None of these systems are really based on trust at all. Everything has to be approved, I should point out. The one that doesn't, interestingly, Fish World, this is the one kind of negative interaction I found. You can steal your friend's fish. You show up to their fish tank, you can feed them, pet them, care for them, and then take one. And when your friend logs in, they find a note that says, so-and-so stole your fish. And they can go to your tank and steal it back, but if it's more than 4 hours, you can sell the fish. So, and you can only steal one per day. But it is the one game I found with this kind of negative social interaction. And finally, you can improve on the world in a few games. So this is Cityville again. Your friends can water your crops so that they mature sooner or produce more. They can revive them if they're withered. And you see this when you go back in the space. And likewise, Fishville, if you are away from your fish and you don't feed them and they all die and they're just skeletons floating in the tank, your friend can bring them all back to life. And when you come back, they will all be alive again. City of Wonder does this as well with these wonders that you can build. You need so many clicks from your friends visiting your space to actually build them. And I mentioned interactions with friends' avatars. This is actually pretty limited, going back to that avatar identification thing. And most often happens when avatars are pets, that you can clean them, kiss, dance, hug them, brush a horse. There are very few. Yeovil used to have more. These were little people avatars. You could talk with them, dance with them, hit them, slap them. They stopped that at one point. But there's very little kind of interaction with the actual avatar. Again, limiting what you can do with avatars. Challenge and competition is pretty big with certain genres of games, as you can guess, sports and strategy. You put together teams, and these teams compete either against your friends' teams or also against just anybody's teams, anybody who's playing the game. This is NBA Legends. Most of these are not played in real time. They're just stat-based. You put together a team, it ranks against the other person's team, and it does a little math. You just see some text fly up, and then boom, it's over, and somebody won or lost. One of the few kind of real-time games, Texas Hold'em Poker, it is turn-based, but you can actually play it against other people simultaneously. And this is Miscrits, which is kind of a Pokemon clone, where you can battle Pokemon in a stadium. You each have 4, and it's turn-based because of considerations of lag. And so you can actually battle, and this is also against strangers as well. In this case, you do, like the poker one, everybody has to agree to play at the same time, as opposed to things like Crazy Caravans or City of Wonder, where players can challenge anybody else who's kind of in the game. And some of these games let you know, again, that you won or lost, and will actually take gold away from you. Part of playing the game is the agreement that your character will be doing this. Others really leave no trace. And it's not just the strategy games. This is It Girl. You can battle for popularity. You battle on things like your hotness factor, your click size, which is how many friends you have, and you get a closet bonus for how many clothes you need to go out shopping. And also in the game, I was playing it for this, and like I said, Steve thinks you're cool. Do you want him as your boyfriend? And immediately I thought, well, what will I get? It's kind of what these games promote. So there's a few games that give you kind of glory or fame. There are leaderboards for most of these. Some of them give you certain bonuses. I didn't mention Isle of Tune. It's not really a Facebook game. You create these little islands with elements. You run cars across the track, and it creates music based on what you decorate it with. And players can host them, and they get ranked up or down. But there's really no relation back to identity. And then finally, communication, which as a communication scholar I'm sort of expecting to find is really pretty impoverished. The majority of games presume that you're not playing in real time, and so you can do things like leave messages, post on walls. Dragon Age Legends, you can put your own kill phrase in that your friends will see. So the interactions are mainly through gameplay, through activity. Yoville lets you do real-time chat if your friends happen to be there. The same with My Vineyard. Real-time strategy games usually have a global chat channel and one for your alliance. But those are pretty much the only options. So, kind of wrapping up this section, friends are there, but they're mostly silent. It's kind of like this idea of, a lot of MMOs where people don't actually interact with a whole lot of strangers in MMOs. Other researchers have found they just kind of like them around. It's like going to the mall to be surrounded by other people. It's like, I really don't want to talk to you, but I'd like to have you there. But help is pretty much a transaction. It's really not skill-based, it's click-based. And even the few games where skill is supposedly in evidence, it's mostly about stat building. And of course, the more friends you have, the more status you have in the game. Friends are just this resource kind of to be mined. And they can also add content by having more places for you to visit, more gifts to get, that kind of thing. So that just kind of wraps that up. So how do avatars fit in? There are a few games that actually kind of go the route of like a more traditional MMO. This is Dragon Age Legends, where you are supposed to create an avatar that actually you'll notice is very similar to an RPG. It's got stats, it's got a class, it's got levels. You've got a name that's specifically different from your Facebook profile name. You've got that customizable war cry. You have a castle. You can respec. You can do all kinds of things. This is the gameplay for Dragon Age Legends, where you can see, again, your friend bar at the bottom. You can see here, you can see Chris, level 10, who's the guy I was in the level at war with. He's beating me here. You can recruit your friends' avatars into battle with you. Again, part of playing the game is assuming that your avatar will be used, and if you win the battle and your friend survives, they get automatically some coins for doing so. But there are very few games that actually kind of have that level of avatar creation and interaction. This is Parking Wars 2, which is in closed beta. This is my street. Friends have cars, they park on your streets, and you can see here the signs for what's acceptable change over time, and if they don't move them in time, you can ticket them. That's the central mechanic. So Darius just got a ticket. But there is no avatar. There is no sense of self. It's just me and Consalvo's street, and everything is named by your Facebook profile. Likewise, this is Cityville. It's got your real names. It's got your pictures at the bottom based on your Facebook profile. And Zynga has done this, interestingly enough. You can see kind of the little thumbnails up on the screen. They used to have, like with Farmville and Frontierville, the avatars that you could create and customize a little bit. But they've gone to these thumbnail pictures, which are actually your Facebook profile. So they've gone away from that sense of an avatar to really pretty much your profile. This is Zombie Lane. It does have a very basic avatar that you can create, but it really doesn't matter kind of what the avatar looks like from the point of view of gameplay. It's just a way to probably spend some virtual currency. So in these games, they're kind of sliding along that scale even further away from avatars and identification. It's more linked to your Facebook profile than anything else. And also the structure of the games, kind of work against any kind of deep sense of that, because they're designed to be played in short bursts of time, maybe multiple times throughout the day, but not for extended sessions. Gifting and visiting are seen as more important than anything else. These games are really high churn rates. People just sort of chew through it quickly. And again, even if you are given an actual avatar, it often doesn't mean very much. It's just kind of an empty container. And the last one I want to talk about are kind of what I call ethical decision-making games, and what the potential is there for avatars and identification. These are games like those in the Dragon Age, Mass Effect, Fable, Fallout, those kinds of games where you're given choices, and the conceit is you can kind of change the storyline based on the decisions you can make. Most of them boil down to, do you choose like the light side or the dark side? Do you choose to be the good guy or the bad guy? Interestingly, in Fable, your avatar actually changes based on your choices, and so you interestingly grow a little bit more Aryan and blonde as you get more good, and you get horns as you get more evil. But most of the time, as I mentioned, these are storyline based. And so players can play through them, position themselves, and kind of use the avatar as a stand-in for themselves, and thinking through, well, what would I do, or maybe what would this character do, what would Colonel Shepard do in Mass Effect, right? But interestingly, going back to this idea of the original women from World of Warcraft and gender, and how gender was an important baseline for them, it seems that I had a class do research talking with players who played these games, that it seemed like there was not a lot of experimentation, or much less than we had originally envisioned. That players, again, that this was sort of a baseline for them, these ethical standards that they had. So these are just some quotes from some of the players. I always seem to go good. I can go evil if I force myself to be evil. I really have to force myself to do it. It never comes naturally to me. I generally do good because it's easier. It's how I was raised. For example, it's easier to be good because that's how you're trained as a person. But you translate that into gamer world almost innately. Interesting phrases. These are people who, even if they're envisioning this sort of separate persona, it's almost as if they can't. And probably about, I think, 80%, like if we asked, if you get the choice to be like the good guy or the bad guy, about 80% responded that they were the good guy. And some of them would say, okay, but that's the first playthrough, like maybe on the second playthrough, I tried the other side to see what happened. But it was just sort of striking how much of a default position that was, that they were bringing that sense of themselves into the game space. And that apparently it was a real difficulty. You can see that here. I was trying to do kind of evilish things, but when I went into game autopilot mode, I would naturally make the good guy choices, and I started to get renowned back. This is from Infamous good guy points. And I was like, no, I don't want to do this, stop it. They couldn't even stop themselves. They said, I just was doing what came naturally to me, which was apparently, and I find this reassuring, being the good person. And some people did resort to talking about game mechanics. They said, well, this is just the way that the game works. A few of them said, well, you get more content as the good guy. That really being evil is not about being evil, it's about being selfish. That you won't help these players, right? These NPCs. You won't go on this quest. And so these were kind of the rational saying, I want my money's worth out of the game, which means doing all of these side quests. And so I'm going to be the good person. A few of them did make some interesting notes about, this is Modern Warfare 2, on the No Russian level. We had also asked them about this. This was an optional level in the game where you were undercover with a terrorist group, and you went through this airport and you killed all of the civilians there. First of all, you don't have to play the level. And if you do, you don't have to shoot anybody yourself. You can't shoot your group members. But you still have to witness it, even if you don't take part. And interestingly, some people said things like, well, it's kind of, the game is not being fair, it's breaking this contract with you because in a game you were supposed to be the hero. You were supposed to be on the side of right, and here you are suddenly, and supposedly there's this greater good that you're doing this for, to infiltrate this group, gain their trust, to get into like the networks of power. At the end of the level, they reveal that they know who you are, and they shoot you. Sorry, spoiler. And so it's of no use, all of this effort that you went through totally backfired. And players, said that they thought that was actually disturbing. So, player intent can sometimes trump the fiction, even if the game is nudging you. Oh, you can try this, you can try that, you can go in all of these different directions. Again, here's a point where players are saying, no, this is my stand, I cannot do this. Even if I try, I default back. And so, even within MMOs, going back to those few original examples, where you think that there might be some similarities, you can see these differences in how games position players and kind of push you in one direction or another, and also how players can push back. And so, just to conclude, even with customization and greater levels, the gameplay still matters to people. Avatars matter in certain circumstances, but the fiction does help to shape how we react. And also, we can reject that fiction as well, and use use our own values and our own beliefs as we go through and